Hi everyone, this is Sam with Wine News in 5. Before I get to global news, a bit of team news. It was announced yesterday that Jancis has been appointed patron of the Regenerative Viticulture Foundation. In taking on this role, she's agreed to amplify the foundation's work and encourage wine growers, producers, and consumers to work towards an environmentally responsible wine industry. This builds on work she's been doing for years at jancisrobinson.com, using the site to raise awareness of important environmental issues. The site has long supported the RVF, which Jancis describes as the only global organization dedicated to making regenerative farming practices scalable, credible, and practical across the wine industry. I also want to make sure that you guys know that registration for the Old Vine Conference opened yesterday. The conference is going to take place in California from October 31st to November 4th. Jancis will be delivering the keynote address on October 31st in Napa Valley. And the link for registration is in the transcript of this video and also on our website under the drop-down community menu. The page is called Where to Find Us. All right. In terms of global news, today we'll discuss huge storms in France, a French study on the level of microplastics in various packaged beverages, protests in France over rock-bottom supermarket pricing, human trafficking in Champagne, Vietnam raising taxes on alcohol, and 67 Pall Mall's latest location. Starting with huge storms in France. The last few weeks have not been kind to French wine growers. On June 14th and 15th, hail hit the Châtillonnais region north of Dijon. The storm damaged approximately 1/3 of the 400 hectares, which is 988 acres, planted in the region, mostly containing fruit destined for Cremant de Bourgogne. The storm also caused mudslides in Lox-Corton and Pernod-Vergelès, but did not damage any vines. On June 19th, much of France entered a heat wave with temperatures reaching 38 degrees Celsius, 100 degrees Fahrenheit in some departments, and causing concern about the possibility of berry necrosis, which is when berries burn and shrivel due to extreme heat. The heat broke on June 24th, when massive thunderstorms moved across much of France. The intensity of these storms killed 2 people, injured 17, and left more than 110,000 homes without power. A Wine News listener in Landais, south of Bordeaux, wrote in to share that his region experienced hailstones as large as 6 centimeters, 2.5 inches, but he didn't know the extent of damage to local vineyards. Photos in the Telegraph show golf ball-sized hail in the Dordogne, southeast of Bordeaux. Luckily, Bordeaux itself seems to have been spared. Our correspondent James Lawther reports that there was a tiny bit of hail in Bordeaux, but very isolated with no particular sector hard hit and little or no damage. Meteo France predicts more heat to come this weekend, peaking next Monday and Tuesday. If you have any details on the effects of this weather on vineyards, please email me at news@jancisrobinson.com. I'd really appreciate that. On to a French study on the level of microplastics in various packaged beverages or various beverage packages. A study commissioned by France's Food Safety Agency, ANSES, and published in the Journal of Food Composition and Analysis looks at the level of microplastics in beverages in different types of containers and has generated a wave of provocative headlines across major media outlets. The New York Post ran one that read, "Glass bottles found to have 5 to 50 times as many microplastics as plastic bottles in shocking new study." But if you read the study, it's not about the glass nearly as much as it's about the closure. The abstract of the study clearly states it was observed that the most contaminated containers were glass bottles. Caps were suspected to be the main source of contamination, as the majority of particles isolated in beverages were identical to the color of the caps and shared the composition of the outer paint. In essence, the study finds that crown caps rub together during storage, resulting in micro scratches in the alkyd thermosetting resin or PES-PET-based paint used to label these caps, which then results in loose microplastics, which, if left unrinsed, end up in the beverage. However, wine is mostly not affected. As the report states, the results show that glass containers were more contaminated than other packaging for all beverages except wine, because wine bottles were closed with cork stoppers rather than metal caps. Next, protests in France over rock-bottom supermarket pricing. On June 18th, wine growers in Bordeaux and the Côte d'Rhône gathered to protest the German-owned supermarket chain Aldi after reading that the beer, wine, and spirits buyer at Aldi France, Roger Anthony, told French publication Vitisphere that his selling Bordeaux and Côte d'Rhône at €1.99 a bottle still managed to make wine growers money. Cedric Pontet, president of the Young Farmers of Gironde, told Vitisphere that the protests were to remind the public that at a retail price of €3, it is impossible to pay for the production of a wine and for the intermediaries responsible for delivering that wine to the public. On to human trafficking in Champagne. On June 19th, a case known as the Grape Harvest of Shame went on trial in Chalon in Champagne. As reported in The Guardian, 57 people who had been employed by a firm that supplied labor to wineries in Champagne had been housed in fetid conditions and forced to work in conditions likened to slavery, where they were provided too little food, largely rice and rotten sandwiches, and transported via vans with no seats or windows. France Bleu reported that the deputy prosecutor for this case, Jean-Philippe Moreau, requested that manager of the service company be sentenced to 4 years in prison and a €300,000 fine, that the recruiters for the company be sentenced to 3 years in prison and a €100,000 fine, and that the company be dissolved, and that the wine cooperative that was using the service be fined €200,000. The court will issue a verdict on July 21st. Next, Vietnam raising taxes on alcohol to 90%. On June 14th, Reuters reported that Vietnam's National Assembly had approved a proposal to raise the consumption tax on alcoholic beverages from 65% to 90% by 2031. This is despite the fact that the chief of Beer and Alcoholic Beverage Association said industry revenue has been in decline for the last 3 years. While Vietnam is not a large wine market, it was a growing one, so we'll see what happens. Finally, 67 Pall Mall's new location. 67 Pall Mall, a group of private members clubs for wine lovers that has locations in London, Verbier, Singapore, Bordeaux, and Beaune, announced on June 20th that they are accepting membership applications for their new Shanghai location. The club, scheduled to open in 2026, will be housed in a 100-year-old grand mansion building in Donghu Garden in the Shui district of Shanghai. The club plans to have 5,000 selections on its wine list, as well as 1,000 wines by the glass. That's all for this episode of The Wine News. There will be no newscast next Friday, July 4th. I'll see you on the 11th. If you enjoyed this newscast and you'd like to see it continue, please become a member of jancesrobinson.com. And if you have breaking news in your area, please email me at news@jancesrobinson.com. Thanks.